Well, good morning. My name's Ulrich Dyer, and I must be slightly mad because here I stand in front of you all, a room full of gin experts, and 18 months ago I didn't even know how to make gin. I blame Olivier Ward for his excellent course on how to open a gin distillery, which gave me the confidence and the inspiration to actually do this. Faced with that challenge, all you can do is really go with what your strengths are. And my strengths are a background in chemistry. I've invented and scaled up many very sophisticated chemistry processes, and I've done that at the very highest quality standard in the pharmaceutical industry. So this is my story. So this is Northern Ireland on a good day. And I've shown the distilleries in Northern Ireland that at least I know about. There may be more, so apologies if there are any more. Woodlab's the only one that doesn't have a visitor experience. All these other ones do superb visitor experiences. You need to come to Northern Ireland for a gin and Game of Thrones tour, because I can assure you it is a fantastic country. This region here that I've highlighted where Woodlab is has got a unique microclimate here because of the effect of the lake and the Gulf Stream. Temperatures very rarely fall below 3 degrees C, very rarely rise above 18 degrees C, and it rains virtually every day. So it's excellent for growing, and it's particularly excellent for growing apples. This is the Armagh, I beg your pardon. This is the Armagh region where they grow Armagh Bramley apples. They have PGI, protected geographical ingredient status. They grow 40 million of these apples every year. They're used in cooking, all sorts of cooking uses. They have a very low sugar and a very high acidity, i.e. flavour, on these apples. And that's, I've made this apple gin, which is a sample here from these Armagh Bramley apples, alongside, obviously, a predominance of juniper there. So please enjoy. So I chose to do an approach which is a multi-shot approach. I know it's not for traditionalists, but it works for me because what I do is individually distill each botanical to make super concentrates and then add that to the base spirit. Why that's good? Number one, I can control the quality of each individual botanical, and as you can appreciate, coming from the pharmaceutical industry, you know, I'm passionate about quality assurance, and this gives me a handle on each botanical. The second thing, it allows me to use very seasonal products by distilling the particular concentrate at the time that it's the freshest, and then keeping those concentrates so I can use those all year round. A couple of pictures then. So this is Woodlab. There's the lab, and there's the wood in the background. Pretty good branding, eh? This is the vegetable patch where you see the raised beds here and the raspberries here, where I grow all the botanicals for the gin, other than the ones that I grow in the greenhouse. You know, we're not one man and a dog outfit. We do have some chickens to help as well. This is me in the lab. So this is me with a microwave gin still. I think I'm the first person in the world to use a microwave to distill gin. Probably not the last, but at least it's on record that I was the first. It's a fantastic piece of kit, believe me, and I'm only just really starting to learn about its potential. So armed with this, which is a 5-litre still and a 5-litre rotary evaporator, then I have the potential to produce 5,000 litre batches of gin using just this equipment. So it's good, it's nice, and it's compact. It keeps my footprint small. It allows me to scale up as the business grows. So, how did I go about coming up with gin recipes? So I collected, perfectly legally, because I'm not selling any of this, local botanicals and also typical gin ingredients that would go into a standard gin. And using some friends at the University of Ulster, we did GCMS on these prepared distillates. So of each of those botanicals, I produced a hot and a cold distillate to see if there was any difference between it being distilled hot and being distilled cold. So we produced a series of these chromatograms. So here you've got the GC trace of a particular botanical. Each of these peaks is a molecule, and each of those molecules get sent down to the tube to the mass spec analysis, which then comes up by fragmenting the molecules and then recognizing the molecules, just like you would like number plate recognition, identify what molecules there are. So the initial results of those was that you look at all those botanicals, but they're all very, very similar in what they contain. It actually makes you appreciate how sophisticated juniper itself is because of the number of molecules that it contains. This analysis also allowed me to dismiss some botanicals. In looking at them and me being a medicinal chemist and knowing the structures, there were some functionalities that in molecules that we foraged that I didn't like and I wouldn't want to put in the gin. Such things, we've talked about coumarins. A number of the ones that we isolated had members of the coumarin species within them. An example is meadowsweet, for example, which is known for having that. There were also some aniline functionalities in there, and again, as a medicinal chemist, you would try and avoid aniline functionality being there. Now, obviously, toxicity obviously depends on the actual amount that you're giving, and some of these were in tiny amounts, but I just from my background, I just didn't want to risk it, so they were eliminated. Knowing what the molecules were helped me identify what was the best method to isolate the flavour. And also by looking at the results of comparing hot and cold, you can see what effect it's been by distilling it hot to distilling it cold. A classic example is ginger. When you distill it cold, you get very nice citrus notes. When you look at the hot distillate, you can see that those molecules have actually transformed into the ginger, spicy ginger that you get from ginger biscuit type taste. So you've gone from citrus to very spicy ginger by heating it. And just looking at the sorts of molecules that were there, it just, to me, provided inspiration for the recipe design. So then went about isolating specific flavours within these botanicals. So the variables that I had at my disposal to get the best out of them, obviously various variables in how you macerate it, including physical form. Do you grind it up or do you do it whole? And then all the various aspects of the science of distillation of how you can isolate specific molecules. What starting ABV you do to isolate particular maybe lipophilic compounds, for instance. What column properties have, the number of theoretical plates give you better fractionation. Do you do it cold distillation or do you do it hot distillation? And also when you do the cuts. But chemical analysis has its limits, and we need another method to quantify the flavours. I wasn't content with just using GCMs and the knowledge of those molecules to start the design and characterize the distillates I'd prepared. So we need another method. So taste and smell is obviously something that you guys have, the experience about. Interestingly, it's all about molecules interacting with receptors, so very familiar territory to me as a medicinal chemist. Because all of these are either ion channels, which is like the salt and the bitter, or they're what we call GPCR receptors, G-protein coupled receptors. Why is that important? Well, as a group a collective of medicinal chemists, we have been the most successful at interacting and finding molecules that interact with GPCR receptors. So in terms of how I approached this, I approached it in the same way as I would do others. And that is, when a molecule interacts with a receptor, you get this sigmoidal type curve. So what I did for each individual flavour was prepare a series of concentrations and then taste all those concentrations. So the first point is the detection point, where you don't just taste ethanol and water. There's something there, but you can't recognise it. The second point is the recognition point, when you do actually recognise it. And then the third point is where increasing concentrations doesn't give you an increase in the flavour. And then this EC50 is a well-known thing for me. It's basically halfway between this point and this point. Now, this should be a straight line, but my PowerPoint skills aren't that great. But when you're developing a recipe, you need to be operating in this linear part. So when you increase the concentration, you get an increased effect. If you started designing your recipe and you're operating in this plateau effect, if you increase the concentration or decrease the concentration, you still get the same effect. So you have no control over the design and what the impact of that particular flavour is. The other thing of interest to me is that you have 1, 2, 3, 4 different data points by which you can set a specification. So when I do another distillation of this particular flavour, I have a specification I can work against. So it's not just a GC specification. You can also, does it match the same concentrations against a reference sample to give you all these points? So you get quality control, you get consistency in your gin. So you control by GCMs and organoleptically your initial botanical that you buy in, the flavour that you've produced by distillation, and obviously the gin that you make. So where it starts to get complex is that we're not dealing against a single receptor, and also we're not dealing with a single molecule. We're dealing with over 100 molecules in a gin. So you get so some molecules are much more potent than others. Some have a different profile where changing the concentration, you get the flavour over a much wider concentration. So something that's good for developing a recipe is something with this shape rather than something that you have a shape like that. Where it gets even more complicated is that we have over 180 different receptors, both olfactory and taste receptors that we're trying to deal with. And that's where art comes in and science can only help. So just taking you through the recipe design of the dry gin that I produce, very similar to the apple gin that you've had, just slightly tweaked to go with the apple. So the things I was looking to look for in the design was what neutral spirit we would have, the source of juniper, the source of coriander, and what other complementary flavours we have. So quickly, we chose apple as our neutral spirit. We're in an apple growing area, so it made a lot of sense from an authenticity point of view. I wanted to find a juniper that most closely related to the juniper that I could access, and the only juniper I could find was juniper from Cumbria, and it was so juvenile that it didn't have berries, so I had to identify what was in the leaves, and there's a good correlation in the literature between what was in a leaf and what was in a berry. Similarly with coriander, there's all sorts of different sources of coriander, but I chose English. It was the closest to what I'd used before. And finally, how I went about developing the recipe. So this is an acknowledgement for Matthew Pawley. He gave a great talk last year and showed how you could do a Venn diagram to explain your recipes. So basically, I started off with a core of these 4 and then added individually different botanicals and to see whether they would add or take away to the recipe. Basically, this is what we ended up. So the size of the circle is the number of botanicals in there. Where they overlap is where they share the botanicals. Where they don't overlap, they're bringing something new to the party. So, in conclusion, science did assist the art of recipe design, identified botanicals with potential toxicities. We helped source large-scale botanicals through GCMS. We use science of distillation to isolate the flavours and assure quality, and use science to minimise the number of botanicals. The last thing I just want to show you is we also use science to help the design of the bottles. You see here, these musical notes are actually hexagons, and that's because when I showed the designer my GCMS trace, all they saw was hexagons. When I talked about the individual flavour peaks that were in there, all they saw was sticks. And so that's why when you look on the bottles here, you see different music. It's not, it's actually different, inspired by different GC traces of the 3 different gins. So I'd just like to thank the Gin Guild and Nicholas for the invitation, Olivia Ward, who inspired everything in me starting out this, Will Lowe, who again gave me inspiration because she could actually make gin using a rotary evaporator, Diego and Barry for doing the GCMS analysis, Invest Northern Ireland, who paid for the analytical work there, and Brand Etiquette, who did the bottle design. So thank you.